This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China has adopted a resolution to deepen reforms and propel the country's modernization as the Communist Party concludes its third plenum. Japan and Pacific Island nations raise concerns about regional military buildup and declare their opposition to any attempt to change the status quo by force. While Vietnam has filed a UN claim for an extended continental shelf in the central South China Sea, echoing the Philippines' move just a month ago. And the world's #1 contract chipmaker TSMC reports better than expected results and upgrades its forecast. But will the headwinds from a potentially tougher US stance on Taiwan cloud that outlook? And ahead on East Asia Tonight, we'll take you to Indonesia's largest auto show, where Chinese and Japanese car makers vie for dominance.
The Gaikindo Indonesia International Auto Show is an important barometer for the automotive market in the country. Last year, the exhibition attracted nearly 500,000 visitors.
Plus, the U.S. presidential campaign rhetoric heats up with the Republican vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, in his latest comments saying that China is enriching its citizens at the expense of Americans. We'll have an expert weigh in. China has adopted a resolution to further deepen reform to advance the country's modernization as the Communist Party concludes one of its most important political meetings, the 5-yearly third plenum. The gathering, which usually sets out major economic and social development goals, had been engaged in closed-door discussions in Beijing since the start of the week. And for more, Olivia Seong joins us now from Beijing. Olivia, let's just start with some lines from the communique, from expanding domestic demand to resolving risks in real estate and local government debt. A lot was being written, but how substantive are they?
I'll tell you, it was a rather lengthy communique that was released, but if we were to perhaps talk about the substance or policy specifics, it did seem to be a bit short on that. But that was not unexpected. We had been expecting that because we are expecting the release of the full decision of this resolution to come out in the next few days, along with an explanation by President Xi, an authoritative explanation also to be released to explain a bit more about the rationale behind this decision. But what we saw in this document, this communique, was more of a broad direction, a lot of reiteration as well of previous policy direction that had been spoken about before. I spoke to an economist from Moody's Analytics, and he said what was positive was that there was a pledge to diffuse risks in the property sector with local government debt and small and medium-sized financial institutions. These were challenges, as we know, as China's economy continues to face headwinds, bringing in that slower than expected GDP growth in the second quarter of the year, as we had seen that data being released earlier this week. Also, however, the analysts did say that it was disappointing to see no commitment to support domestic consumption, which we know has been a persistent drag on China's economy, despite the government taking measures to try to boost spending here in the country. But perhaps what also may be seen as positive pledges by the markets would be for the role of the market to be better leveraged, with market restrictions to be lifted, while also ensuring effective regulation. There was also mention about the development of the private economy alongside the public sector, but an emphasis also on strengthening the country through innovation-driven development. development, which has really become a buzzword of late as China seeks greater self-reliance and as it talks about developing its new productive forces, for example, in clean technology and other advanced technology to boost its economy. What was specific, though, were some targets, some years, some dates that were given in this communique of building a high-standard socialist market economy by 2035 and completing the reform task by 2029. Now, that's when the People's Republic of China will mark its 80th founding anniversary. But what exactly these reform tasks are, that is something that will have to be fleshed out as we are expecting media briefings from government officials in the next few days. I'll tell you.
Olivia, aside from what you've mentioned, Beijing also announced some personnel changes. Anything interesting on that front?
I'll tell you, we had been wondering whether or not there would have been any personnel changes during this plenum. And today we are seeing more light being shed on the former foreign minister Qin Gang, who was removed from his post just last year abruptly without any further explanation just 7 months into the job. He has not been seen in the public since mid last year, but today the communique said that the Central Committee accepted his resignation application and removed him as a member of the Central Committee. Now, there have been questions about the former foreign minister's fate after there being reports that he was under some sort of investigation, possibly linked to national security. But the fact that he was referred to in this communique as Comrade Qin Gang, perhaps also raising further questions as to what exactly is going on, as to the reasons behind the removal from his post, especially when we compare that to the mention of how the Central Committee also passed the inspection report of the Central Military Commission with regard to former Defense Minister Li Shangfu and the former Rocket Force Commander Li Yuchao for what it says were, quote, serious violations of discipline and law. Now, the term comrade was not used to refer to them. And we do know that the former Defense Minister Li Shangfu had been expelled from the Communist Party just last month over investigations into corruption. Now, some analysts had also been saying that this may have been an opportunity to promote or elevate the current Defense Minister Dong Jun to the Central Military Commission, but we aren't seeing that. We didn't see that take place. And so still many questions and much to analyze as to the reasoning behind that particular personnel change that didn't happen, especially as, China's military continues to come under scrutiny and as there have been several reports on ongoing corruption investigations. I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you pointed out that Qin Gang was referred to as a comrade. But in terms of this specific announcement, what is the political significance with this announcement for the Chinese president?
I'll tell you, prior to the close of this third plenum, state media had been in overdrive. We have seen documentaries, commentaries being published about the third plenum, painting it as a new milestone, the next milestone in China's chapter of reform and opening up, and placing President Xi right front and center, being personally involved in charting that journey, calling him a true reformer. But what analysts have said is that despite all these overtures and pledges that are being made, what will be key is the implementation of policy. And what remains to be seen is how substantive the changes and reform will be. Also, given that the people we have been speaking to here in China have raised concerns over a range of issues that affect their day-to-day living. Have a listen.
老百姓对这个房产呢，就是前几年花高价钱买的房子，现在房子第一价钱上不去，第二呢，有的落价很大。
您个人有买房吗？
买了，而且有贷款。现在的经济呢稍微是有一点紧张，那是没办法，这很正常。
就还是经济吧，老百姓生活其实挺难的，挺苦的。你要是像在生活在大城市里，可能也有条件好的，也有条件不好的。你生活在小县城里的人也是有，富的就是特别富，然后穷的就可能会特别穷。希望就是咱们能 适当的调整一下这种，怎么样能把这个贫富的这个比例稍微拉一拉。
找工作特别难，就是被骗过，也被就是也是没找到好的工作，没有找到合适自己的。因为年轻人出来的比较多嘛，然后暑假工或者说学生那种的也出来比较多，很多的时候都会压榨你，就是给你很少的工钱，让你干很多的活嘛。
So I tell you, if we were to sum this up, a lot has been said, but there's still a lot we do not know. We'll be looking out for the specifics in terms of implementation and policy measures, not just in the next few days, but possibly in the months to come. Back to you.
We'll look forward to speaking to you again when that happens. Thanks so very much, CNA's Olivia Seong in Beijing. Japan and Pacific Island nations have sharpened their stance on regional security, expressing strong opposition to any attempt to change the status quo by force. Well, the joint declaration was made during a summit attended by more than a Pacific Island countries in Tokyo. Well, China is not explicitly mentioned in the joint statement, but observers believe this is a veiled reference to Beijing. Such phrasing is often used by the U.S. and its allies to refer to China's growing influence and military capacity in the Asia-Pacific. Well, the summit is seen to have become Japan's key diplomatic tool since its inauguration in 1997 to counter China's reach in the region.
さまざまな環境の変化に直面をしており、法の支配に基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序の維持強化に向けた日本と太平洋島しょ国との協力と連携の重要性はますます高まっています。
The latest joint statement also states that Pacific Island countries would, quote, strengthen defense exchanges through port calls for Japanese aircraft and vessels. Climate change, however, tops concerns when it comes to security and livelihoods in the Pacific.
For our region, climate change remains the single greatest existential threat to us. We contribute less than 0.03% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions, yet we are amongst the most vulnerable to its impacts. And yet we face the greatest difficulties in accessing climate financing.
The Pacific Islands Summit is held every 3 years, and the region has become a focus of security concern for Japan, the US, and traditional regional partners, Australia and New Zealand, as many island nations become increasingly economically reliant on China. Our time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Chinese EV giant BYD makes another push into Southeast Asia. This time, it set its sights on Vietnam.
Welcome back to East Asia Tonight. Time to get you up to speed in business. Chip stocks in Asia tumbling today, mirroring a steep decline on Wall Street. The sell-off spurred by a report that Washington is considering tighter curbs on exports of advanced semiconductor technology to China. Wall Street Semiconductor Index lost more than $500 billion in market value overnight. Sharp drop we see for South Korean memory chip maker SK Hynix. Samsung Electronics, which is the world's biggest memory chip maker, managed to reverse course and end the day in the green, about 0.2% there. Japanese chip equipment maker Tokyo Electron plunging by the most in 9 years, at one point more than 10% down. Supplier of testing equipment to NVIDIA Advantest under pressure today as well. Comments from Donald Trump that key production hub Taiwan should pay the U.S. for its defense hit investor sentiment pretty bad. So we're looking at the TAIEX there, 1.5% down, retreating sharply, dragged by index heavyweights like electronic giant Foxconn. Shares of the world's #1 contract chip maker TSMC also among the worst hit. They have shed roughly $61 billion in market value over the past 2 days. But now it's time to cheer for the Taiwanese chip giant. TSMC posted a market-beating second quarter report card as it rides a surge in demand for semiconductors used in AI applications. The major supplier to Apple and NVIDIA saw April to June net profit rise to $7.6 billion from $5.6 billion last year, and that marks a 36% jump, crushing market forecast of $7.3 billion. The chip giant also upgraded its revenue forecast for the current quarter, seeing sales surge 34%. TSMC has reaped the benefits from strong AI chip demand that's briefly pushed its market caps past $1 trillion in New York trade. Despite the recent declines, its stock has soared nearly 70% so far this year in Taipei. Insatiable demand for NVIDIA chips has propped up TSMC's performance, while the wider smartphone market is on path to recovery. Still, investor euphoria over TSMC's prospect has been overshadowed by the latest escalation of US-China tech tensions.
And joining us for a deep dive into TSMC's results is Rolf Balk, equity research analyst, New Street Research.
Well, I'll start with a question. So, Rolf, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Good to see you. But I'm going to go straight into the deep end here. With the ongoing headwinds, we are seeing the latest comments from Trump on China and Taiwan, and also the recent happenings, like U.S. trying to tighten its curbs on, exports to China for its advanced semiconductor technology. Are these factors going to derail TSMC's stellar performance today?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. First of all, I think it's important to put into context what we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months. NVIDIA, TSMC, AMD, the entire AI value chain has seen stellar performance and share price appreciation to match. Now, in that context, somewhat of a pullback was always on the cards, and it happens to be that the news flow that we've seen over the last few days that served as a catalyst for the correction that we see today. Now, to put the two items of news flow into perspective. First, the export restrictions that the US is threatening to enforce on China. The reality here is that today China accounts for 40 to 45% of revenues of companies such as Tokyo Electron, ASML, and Applied Materials in the US. Importantly, this is consistent whether those companies are US-based or based in Japan or Netherlands. So increased sanctions will not necessarily have a major impact in my view. Revenues across the supply chain are very similar when it comes to Chinese exposure. And US companies do already have more sanctions that they have to adhere to. With regards to the comments made by Trump 2 days ago, here, of course, TSMC's strategy has always been to manufacture in Taiwan. That is the main hub. But a few years ago, they've set up plans to manufacture in Arizona as well, Japan, and there's even talk of a fab in Germany. But manufacturing is extremely complex and especially for the most advanced nodes, also extremely costly. The tools alone for such a fab can be north of 24 billion. So for the most advanced nodes, we expect the manufacturing will remain in Taiwan for the foreseeable future.
So Rolf, just give us your perspective and perhaps elaborate a little bit more on TSMC's plans in the US, because their CEO just sort of shut down the idea of a joint venture on their earnings call. But with so much billions of dollars invested, $65 billion already invested, how do you think they're going to handle if it becomes a Trump 2.0?
Yeah, that's a great question. So TSMC is definitely committed to the fab projects in Arizona. It's a very important strategic move for them. It helps to appease the US to place some of that very strategically important capacity in the US. But that said, the entire electronics value chain and chips value chain is extremely interconnected. There is very little that the US can do unilaterally to force TSMC to commit more of its capacity to the US. So for now, I think we should expect the status quo to be maintained.
Well, Rolf, we know that you are quite bullish when it comes to TSMC share price. We've seen the frenzy of AI technology, the recent comments, and also positive guidance from Apple, giving a boost to TSMC share price recently, although it has dipped somewhat the last few days. Do you see TSMC probably profit-taking happening in the future? Is it overbought, or there's a downward pressure?
Not necessarily. So I think TSMC is one of the main beneficiaries of the AI trend that we've seen. TSMC manufactures all of those chips, whether it's NVIDIA's, AMD's, chips made by Google. TSMC is the exclusive manufacturer. Importantly, when you think about an NVIDIA chip, it goes for around 20,000 or so. It's an expensive chip. But TSMC only books around 1,500 to manufacture and package those chips. What I would expect to see over the coming years is that TSMC is able to extract more of that value for themselves. And that should actually result in a healthy boost to profitability and hopefully upward share price appreciation.
And when it comes to the global chip market, I'm wondering what's your take on that? Because I think Goldman Sachs report cold water on the whole AI hype, that's driving the chip making stocks. So I'm wondering, are you of that same view?
Yeah, so the way that I would think about the market at the moment is that for 2024, we're well advanced and everything looks secure. Nothing can be derailed in such a short time frame. Now, for 2025, expectations of the market are for around 50% growth in AI chips. And at the moment, everything points to that being a feasible target. There might be a bit of upward or downward risk to that, but not sizably so. The real risk is in 2026. Visibility there is still very limited, but that is of course still far out. For 2025, I think all still looks healthy.
Well, something we have to keep our eyes on. Thank you so much for your insight today. Thank you for breaking down the dynamics of the chip sector for us. That was Rolf Walk, Equity Research Analyst at New Street Research. Indonesia's biggest automotive exhibition opens today with the participation of hundreds of leading brands worldwide. The auto show is dominated by automakers from China and Japan that are keen to get a bigger slice of the pie in Southeast Asia's biggest economy. Saiful Bahri Ismail reports from Jakarta.
ION is one of many Chinese automakers which is making its debut at the Gaikindo Indonesia International Auto Show. The company is introducing 2 electric vehicle models at this year's exhibition, which is organized by the Association of Indonesian Automotive Industries, known as Gaikindo. It's not perturbed by the increased interest in the EV market in Indonesia.
Tentunya sebagai pemain baru kita harus membuild brand, memperkenalkan brand kami, terutama bahwa kami adalah pemain terbesar kedua di China, dan itu kita sedang mengedukasi dan juga membuat jaringan untuk wilayah-wilayah Indonesia yang Bapak tahu sangat luas sekali. Jadi kita berani untuk berkompetisi dalam hal teknologi dan juga tingkat kenyamanan customer dan serta layanan. Sehingga untuk masyarakat Indonesia kami harapkan bisa mendapat pilihan yang lebih baik.
Indonesia has been a stronghold of Japanese automakers, which hold more than 90% of the market share. Nissan Motor announced the launch of its latest hybrid e-Power Serena model for the Indonesian market. But it's the Chinese automaker Wuling which is currently dominating the EV market in Indonesia. Wuling has a 52% piece of the EV pie between January and June this year. The company has sold 20,000 units in total in Indonesia. Other automakers understand the greater competition in Indonesia and have devised their own strategies. South Korean brand Kia said it will be launching its new EV model in Indonesia later this year.
So Kia ourselves, because our models, our EV models are not that competitive, is very so that's why we are moving our brands to elevate the brands a bit to the premium side. So that's why we are bringing the top models of the Kia EVs to Indonesia. So we are not focusing to be the mass market brand, but more to the segmented, very segmented and very niche segment of the EVs.
The Indonesian government is urging people to shift from gas-powered to electric vehicles to achieve a target of net zero carbon emissions by 2060. Jakarta is also keen to take advantage of the country's rich nickel reserves, a key material for EV batteries. The Gaikindo Indonesia International Auto Show is an important barometer for the automotive market in the country. Last year, the exhibition attracted nearly 500,000 visitors. Close to 28,000 units of automobiles were sold with a transaction value of about $928 million. This year, the event organizers are certainly expecting bigger numbers. Saifullah Ismail, CNA, Tangerang, Indonesia.
Chinese electric car maker BYD is making another push to expand in Southeast Asia, where the governments impose fewer trade tariffs. This time, it's moving into the region's manufacturing hub of Vietnam. Launching its first 3 pure electric models in Vietnam today, BYD says it will introduce 3 more models in the country in October. The announcement came shortly after the firm opened its first factory in Southeast Asia in Thailand. It also debuted its EVs in Indonesia back in January. The Shenzhen-based firm says Vietnam is the last market it's setting its foot in Asia Pacific. Now it plans to expand its dealerships to about 100 in 2026. And that's all for me from business. Back to you, Telly.
Thanks so very much, Olivia. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Taiwan reiterates its commitment to boosting the island's defenses after U.S. Republican presidential Donald Trump said that Taipei should pay for Washington's protection. And we'll be speaking to an expert on the impact of a possible Trump re-election. China adopts a resolution to further deepen reform to advance the country's modernization as the Communist Party concludes one of its most important political meetings, the third plenum. Japan and Pacific Island nations raise concerns about regional military buildup and declare their opposition to any attempt to change the regional status quo by force at a Tokyo-hosted summit. Vietnam has filed a UN claim for an extended continental shelf in the central South China Sea, echoing the Philippines' move just a month ago. Taiwan says that it will keep working with the U.S. to defend itself, just one day after presidential hopeful Donald Trump said that the island should pay America for keeping it safe. Well, Taiwan's foreign ministry told reporters today it has long enjoyed support from the U.S. government, whether it was Democrat or Republican.
所以其实台湾长久以来在美国享有跨党派的支持，也是跨政府支持。其实在过去，不管是民主党政府或是共和党政府，都是很确实的依据《台湾关系法》还有6项保证，履行对台湾的安全承诺。
Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party has also dismissed Mr. Trump's comments. Its Secretary General, Lin Yucheng, said that China was the biggest threat to the United States and that now was the best era of Taiwan-U.S. relations. Well, the U.S. is Taiwan's most important international backer and arms supplier. Even though they have no official diplomatic ties, Washington is bound by law to provide for the island's defense. But Taiwan's government has often said its security rests in its own hands. The island's defense budget this year is about 2.5% of GDP, its highest ever. And for more insights, we are joined by Sarah So. Now, she's an associate research fellow from the Regional Security Architecture Program at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. So thanks for joining us, Sarah. So in the past few days, we've heard Trump, he's threatened to pull troops out of the region, or he's also threatened to make Taiwan or South Korea pay more if he becomes the next U.S. president. Firstly, how seriously can we take these threats from Mr. Trump?
I think this is to be expected of Mr. Trump. He has said this before. When he was first president, he has demanded that allies step up more, take on a greater role in the defense sharing burden. So to some extent, I think this is to be expected from Mr. Trump. As to whether or not he will really carry through with what he said, I think at this point we should take it with a pinch of salt. And I don't think there is, I don't think he will carry through on these threats. But nonetheless, it is something that we should pay attention to.
All right, Sarah. And now that Trump, well, he's picked a Vance as his VP, right? So how do you see their approach towards China affecting the already tense, U.S.-China relations?
So I think Senator Vance, in terms of his views towards China, his views on the U.S. economy and trade, very much aligns with the Make America Great movement. And of course, the America First agenda, I think, will inevitably impact China, given that the stated goals of this America First agenda are things like to protect U.S. industries, U.S. farmers and workers against unfair foreign competition, the need to rebalance trade, and the need to revitalize manufacturing. So I think with the Trump-Vance ticket, we can expect a further, nosedive in terms of U.S.-China trade relations, and we can expect a stiffening of economic competition if Trump were to make it to the White House again.
Right, and interestingly, you've mentioned this stiffening, of economic competition. In the meantime, these countries, as you've mentioned about Trump's America First policy, which is about its forgotten blue-collar workers, for instance. So do you think this could lead to a shift in these countries' strategic calculations?
I don't think so. I think, in appealing to the blue-collar workers, I think he is doing what he needs to do in order to secure, if you like, the voter base for his campaign. I don't think that will dramatically bring about a shift in terms of these countries' strategic calculations, but they will have to watch U.S. trade policies very carefully moving forward, knowing that Trump is very likely going to focus on the domestic economy and prioritizing, if you like, a U.S. economy at the expense of U.S. global leadership. I think that's something that you will then have to pay attention to.
And Sarah, speaking of Trump 2.0's trade policies, how do you think his stance on tariffs and trade will affect countries like Japan and South Korea? Because, considering that they're caught in the middle between the U.S. And China, which happens to be their two biggest trading partners.
Pardon me, I didn't catch your question. I'm sorry.
No worries.
The connection was a bit unstable.
Sure. Sarah, I was just talking about Japan and South Korea, considering that, they are caught in the middle between the U.S. and China when it comes to Trump 2.0 trade policies. How do you think this is going to affect these two countries?
I think for South Korea and Japan, a Trump presidency is not altogether unfamiliar to them. And I think they have, in a way, taken steps to Trump-proof their relationship with the U.S. So, for instance, this year we see that they have worked to normalize bilateral relations with each other. They have tried to strengthen trilateral cooperation with the U.S. So I think their approach moving forward, in the event of a Trump presidency, would really be to work with the U.S. when they can, and perhaps to work without the U.S. If they need to. Yeah.
And Sarah, if Trump gets re-elected, how do you think that's going to shake up the whole U.S.-China rivalry in the Indo-Pacific? Are we going to see, say, a bigger U.S. military presence in a region, or do you think China will push back even harder and leading to a whole new level of tensions?
I think there are some concerns in some segments that Trump returning to the White House would see some kind of a retrenchment in U.S. regional presence, and perhaps even a reduction in U.S. multilateral engagements in the region. And if this is the case, then I think there are some concerns that this will open up avenues for China to try and step up to sort of carve out a leadership position for itself.
Well, I'm afraid we have lost a connection with Sarah. So She's from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. It was a bit wonky. I'm afraid we've lost her, but she did cover a fair bit of ground on Trump 2.0. And of course, we've got more U.S. election coverage on our website, cna.asia, including this analysis on how ready Southeast Asian states are as chances rise for a Trump 2.0 presidency. Vietnam has filed a claim with the United Nations for an extended continental shelf in the central area of the South China Sea. Well, the Philippines made a similar move a month ago, which prompted China then to urge a UN body not to consider Manila's bid. And here's how international law works. A coastal state's continental shelf can extend up to 350 nautical miles, further than the exclusive economic zone of 200 nautical miles. The ECS, however, only includes the seabed and subsoil, whereas the EEZ also includes the water column. Now, the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry says that under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the nation had full legal and scientific basis to assert its rights to the area, extending beyond the current 200 nautical miles from its shore. This marks Hanoi's third submission, following two others in 2009. In mid-June, Manila filed its own claim for an extended continental shelf in the West Palawan region of the South China Sea, which could risk overlapping with the previous joint submission by Vietnam and Malaysia. Hanoi has sent a note to the UN affirming its sovereignty over the Paracel and Spratly archipelagos. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visits an up-and-coming tourist attraction in the eastern coastal region of Wonsan. And Emmy nominations are out. Who's leading the pack? I'll tell you more right after this break. South Korea's health ministry is pushing hospitals to handle resignations from over 10,000 striking doctors by next week. Well, they've also made it clear that they won't suspend their medical licenses whether they decide to return to work or not. The health minister says authorities are currently reviewing lists of striking doctors submitted by hospitals, noting with regret that most of them are unlikely to return. Special measures have been introduced to support returning doctors, including opportunities for junior doctors to obtain specialist licenses in the upcoming session. Earlier this year, over 90% of South Korea's 13,000 junior doctors participated in a mass walkout, protesting government reforms aimed at increasing medical school admissions. While the government aims to address the doctor shortage, critics, including doctors and professionals, argue that medical schools may struggle to accommodate the increased enrollment, potentially compromising the quality of medical education and services. And as of now, both sides have not reached an agreement on the matter. The walkout has severely disrupted South Korea's healthcare system. Most of the major hospitals have significantly reduced treatments, surgeries, and other services for patients. South Korea's Supreme Court has upheld a landmark ruling allowing same-sex couples to be eligible for spousal benefits from the National Health Insurance. The Chief Justice said that denying couples health benefits on the basis of gender constitutes discrimination based on sexual orientation. The decision follows a 2021 lawsuit against the National Health Insurance Service, or NHIS, for denying spousal benefits to a gay couple. While the country only legally recognizes marriage between heterosexual couples, the NHIS has regulations that allow it to give spousal status to common law partners. Now, same-sex marriage or civil unions are still not legally recognized in South Korea. Well, meanwhile, South Korea has ordered the evacuation of people living near rivers in its central region as heavy monsoon rains lash the area. While large swathes of the country are also on high alert for torrential downpours, including the capital. The border city of Paju and parts of the metropolitan area were battered by heavy rainfall, causing floods in parts of Gyeonggi province.
겁났죠. 한 번 수해 옛날에 98년대 수해 당해가지고 그 생각을 해가지고 막 그 트라우마가 있어가지고 비만 오면 막 겁나고 물이 막 차오르니까 너무너무 겁나요.
물이 조금 빠지는 상태예요. 근데 이제 공천이 넘치다 보니까 여기 역류가 됐어요. 그래서 펌프장에서 물을 못 퍼다 보니까 지금 역류돼서 여기 침수가 됐다가 지금 빠지는 상태예요.
Transport links are also being disrupted by the heavy rains. Some 24 flights at Seoul's Incheon International Airport have been cancelled. Roads have been shut and train services disrupted across the greater Seoul area. At least 10 of the capital's districts are receiving flood advisories. No casualties have been reported so far. The South Korean government also warned about sudden surges in rivers flowing from North Korea and has urged vigilance against landmines planted at the border by Pyongyang that could get washed downstream. Seoul's military is now monitoring the water levels in the main rivers shared by the two countries. It says it cannot rule out the chance that the North planted more mines in recent weeks, fully aware of the likelihood of rain. Well, across the border, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has visited a new beach resort in the eastern coastal region of Wonsan, touting the up-and-coming area as an ideal tourist attraction. A state media KCNA reports that Mr. Kim carried out a field inspection and guidance as the project enters its final stage. And he also called for preparations to be made so that the resort could open by next May. Launched in 2014, the project was originally set to complete by 2019. But reports say construction had been delayed and put on hold since 2020 amid material shortages and the COVID pandemic. Mr. Kim, during the visit with other officials, stressed the need to boost the industry in a long-term manner. And it comes amid a focus on developing major tourist spots, with the leader also visiting another site in the northern city of Sanjeon, which is near Mount Paektu, a mountain considered sacred to the Koreans earlier this month. North Korea has yet to ease its much stricter controls on foreign visitors, apart from Russians, following the pandemic. Observers say the move to boost its tourism offerings could help Pyongyang attract more Russian tourists in the meantime, and also help earn the foreign currency it needs amid crippling international sanctions. Now on to Hong Kong, where buses on one route are all driven by women. Well, the historic achievement has made Route 69 an all-female operated line since early this month. And the line runs through Hong Kong's new territories near the border with mainland China.
Kowloon Motorbus, or KMB, is the city's biggest bus operator and is encouraging more women to sit the driver's seat on its buses in a bid to change the idea that bus driving is only for men. KMB has now staffed one of their routes exclusively with female drivers. 50-year-old Zhang is one of these drivers on Route 69. She has 7 years of experience behind the wheel but still faces doubt from passengers.
而家啲人對我哋女司機咧就標榜啊，即係有時見到我哋所有揸車咧就會講：哎呀，女司機喎，即係感覺到好似冇咩安全感咁樣嘅。
But Zhang is confident she can do her job well.
我覺得咧女性咧相對嚟講係比男性咧温柔少少啦，即係有耐線少少嘅，同埋平易近人啲啦，即係客咧即係可能。 即係有啲人可能會對上車對你講粗口咁，通常望住個女性咧，佢就唔會咁容易出口嘅。
But to some passengers, there is no difference between male and female bus drivers, while others even prefer the women drivers to men.
平等根本無需要用性別嚟分辨㗎。
我覺得有時女車長佢細心啲啦，有時可能照顧到小朋友或者老人家嗰啲位咧係比較適合啲添，仲更加係啊。
Kowloon Motorbus began hiring female drivers in 1989. Today, women make up only 8% of the company's 10,000 drivers. KMB aims to raise this to 10% and is exploring other routes for women drivers. The company has already introduced perks to entice more applicants, such as a women's priority rest kiosk with a changing area and armchair. The company pays all drivers equally and provides the same benefits to everyone. Hong Kong has had a long history of female inclusion in the workforce. Women worked in factories during the early days of economic development, and today they hold positions in boardrooms and government. But despite all this, women's rights still fall short of their male counterparts, with disadvantages in land inheritance in hereditary communities.
In other news, hit TV series Shogun, which is about 17th century feudal Japan, is dominating the Emmy Awards. Well, the show's dialogue is mostly in Japanese, but it's leading this year's contenders for the top trophy with more than 20 nominations. And winners will be announced at a red carpet ceremony on September 15th.
Historical drama Shogun leads the nominations for this year's Emmy Awards, racking up 25 nods on Wednesday. The FX network series is set in the year 1600 and tells the story of a struggle for power in feudal Japan. Shogun will compete for Best Drama, the Emmy's top trophy, alongside Netflix's final installment of British royal saga, The Crown, and its new series, Three Body Problem. A Shogun and The Crown duel is also happening in the Best Drama Actress category. Shogun lead Anna Sawai and The Crown lead Amalda Staunton are both nominated.
Doors!
Nail-biting restaurant tale The Bear, also from FX, earned 23 nominations, a record for a comedy. The show will look to win Best Comedy, a category it won at the last Emmys. Stars Jeremy Allen White and Ayo Edebiri were also nominated for Best Comedy Actor and Actress. Netflix's hit show Baby Reindeer garnered 11 nods. The story about a bartender stalked by a customer was nominated for Best Limited Series. Its creator and star, Richard Gadd, has said it reflects a true story, though a defamation lawsuit argues its portrayal of the stalker is exaggerated. Gadd is nominated for Best Actor in a Limited Series or Movie. Netflix topped all networks with 107 nominations, including 18 for The Crown. FX followed with 93 nods. The last Emmys were held just 6 months ago, in January, when strikes by Hollywood writers and actors prompted a delay. This year's winners will be announced at a red carpet ceremony on September 15th.
Well, it's been a dream for French officials, but a nightmare for Olympic organizers. Could the River Seine be cleaned up enough to swim in and hold competitions for the Games? Well, the Paris mayor has taken the plunge to prove it is ready.
Hundreds of spectators gathered as Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo entered the long polluted waterway, wearing a water suit and goggles. After months of delays and worrying contamination reports, her symbolic swim in the brownish waters of the Seine was broadcast live on national television. Several officials, athletes, and Parisian locals joined the politician to prove that the water is ready for the Olympic Games.
Et elle est très très douce, elle n'a pas du tout de goût de vase et elle est assez claire malgré tout, hein, même si on a eu du mauvais temps jusque-là. Elle est fraîche mais pas froide du tout, c'était très agréable, vraiment, c'était magnifique, on n'avait plus envie de sortir.
Today it's a very important milestone because it's the confirmation that we are ready for the Games. It's a great symbol the day before the first athletes will arrive in Paris. That's the Seine now, the Seine quality is perfect.
The stunt was part of a broader effort to show the river's improved cleanliness ahead of the Summer Olympics. Swimming in the Seine had been banned for a century because of health concerns, as wastewater sometimes overflowed from the city's old sewage system into the river. But since 2015, $1.5 billion has been invested to clean up the river. Some residents, though, aren't convinced by the mayor's quick dip.
J'aime pas la couleur de l'eau.
Ça vous rassure pas de voir Hidalgo se baigner?
Pas vraiment.
Je pense pas que ce soit franchement indispensable, sachant qu'il y a au moins 5 piscines par arrondissement à Paris. Est-ce qu'on a réellement besoin de se baigner dans la Seine? Je ne crois pas que ce soit franchement utile, mais bon, c'est une belle opération de com et de marketing, sans doute.
The Seine will host several open water events, including marathon swimming at the Olympic Games, as well as the swimming legs of the Olympic and Paralympic triathlons.
And that's all we've got for you on East Asia Tonight this Thursday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia and CNA 938 Radio. And if you go online, you can look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.